you for tuning in to Take 10 on Tuesdays with the Tennessee Tribune. I'm Jason Luntz. This week, I decided to invite back a special guest. We had such a great time last week that I wanted her to come again. Today we'll be talking to Ms. Gloria McKissack. How you doing?
Hi, how are you, Jason? Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Now this month, as you know, we've been covering the Civil Rights Movement. This year celebrates 50 years since the historic March on Washington. Ms. McKissack actually had the opportunity to go to another march that, while it may not be as popular in historic terms, was just as important. The march she attended was in Detroit on June 23rd, 1963, and it was called the Walk to Freedom. I'm sure our viewers would like to know some things about this historic march.
Okay, I'll be glad to share it with you because there's a lot of connection between the Detroit Walk to Freedom, June the 23rd, and the Washington March that took place in August the 28th of 1963. I was at that time 19 years old, a student at A&I University, and I had participated in the sit-ins here, and I was home for the summer, and the city was planning to have a march. Actually, the date that was picked, June the 23rd, was to commemorate the Detroit race riot of 1943.
Wow.
I was born in 43 in the midst of a race riot.
Wow.
So that's initially had something to do with it. The organizers of the march, interesting enough, was Reverend C.L. Franklin, who was a big, important minister in Detroit, civil rights leader, and the father of Aretha Franklin.
Wow.
Aretha Franklin then probably was about 22 years old and was just launching her career. She's a friend of my sister. So I knew Reverend Franklin and also Reverend Clegg. Reverend Clegg, later Albert Clegg, would be known for the Church of the Black Madonna and will become quite a militant in the civil rights movement. But they were the two that organized the march. Clegg is interesting in connection with the march. I'm going to compare him to the march in D.C. because he wanted the march really to be an all-black march.
Interesting.
And the local NAACP was going to boycott the march because they knew very well that they had and needed the support of white leadership. At that time, George Romney was the governor of Michigan, which is Mitt Romney's father,
right.
And he was very liberal, did not attend the march. He sent a representative because of his religion, and the march was held on a Saturday, but he supported, and as well as the mayor and other, Walter Reuther, the head of the United Auto Workers and so forth, the unions supported the march, so you couldn't exclude them.
Not at all.
One of the purposes of the march was also to raise money for Martin Luther King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So he was the main speaker at the Walk to Freedom. So these two men, and the comparison is that the march in Washington is interesting. There was also that militant factor involved with the D.C. march with Malcolm X. Malcolm had not yet made that transition where he accepted, the multicultural aspects of Islam. He did that after he went to pilgrimage to Mecca. So he still saw whites as blue-eyed devils. So he did not want, he said the march was a sellout. And that's basically what Clegg was saying, that the march was a sellout to whites. And Malcolm would boycott, and the Muslims would boycott the march on Washington. Yet all the other Big Ten civil rights organizations would participate. And of course, there was a lot of white involvement in both of those marches. They are linked. An important thing, too, to know is the march in Detroit. Another reason for the march was to unite urban issues with the Southern civil rights struggle. People were beginning to realize the commonality the problems of segregation and discrimination were not confined to the South, but it was a nationwide problem. So it was a unity march. But anyway, I went with my mother, and my dad had to work, and my younger siblings, who really don't even remember the march. They were so young. My brother was only 2 in a stroller. But down Woodward Avenue we went. The march in Detroit was the largest mass demonstration that had been held in the country up to that time. And the march on D.C. would
be larger?
Would be larger, but the one in Detroit was 125,000 people.
125,000 people.
125,000 people, you know. And they barely had that population now.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's a shame, but yeah.
Yeah, the chain city, and the D.C. march was about a little over 200,000.
Wow, so they're very comparable.
Yeah, very, very much so. But I remember walking down, Woodward Avenue, and led to the river in Cobo Hall, and so crowded you couldn't get inside. But the thing that I remember so well was the theme, this social justice vision that he had, and you could hear him saying, "I have a dream, I have a dream." And so a few weeks later, when the Washington March took place, and he gave his speech, and he said, "I have a dream," I said, "I heard that speech." There are a lot of similarities, and the one he gave in Detroit was actually longer and more detailed. If you pull it up on Google and read it, it was longer and more detailed, but he was preparing for the march in Washington.
Wow. Now that's some new information. No, you're gonna keep going. I just had to pause for a moment so people can understand that we're speaking about a march that took place prior to the Washington D.C. march. This was in Detroit, Michigan. It was called Walk to Freedom. It was 125,000 people there, and Dr. King gave a speech titled "I Am a Dream," very similar to the famous one he did in Washington D.C. Now, can you recall from that time period, is this a speech that he may have given anywhere else, or these are probably the main 2 times?
Well, in several of his other speeches, you can see the theme developing, where he's talking about a vision, and then he eventually begins to use the word dream. But it was in the Detroit speech that he is almost identical. What he said. By then he had it down.
Yeah.
He had it down. So it was a preliminary preparation for actually the speech in D.C. he had written another speech. He had a speech, and he wasn't even going to use the dream thing.
Wow.
He wasn't even going to use it. And if you listen very closely to the documentaries of the march, you can hear in the background Mahalia Jackson encouraging King to tell him about the dream. Tell him, and we don't know if he actually heard her or not, or if he just decided to go into that theme that he had been preparing and working on. And it was almost identical to what he had said a few weeks in Detroit.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It is.
Now, with speeches that are this famous, when you look back, and we tend to speak about Dr. King, but specifically with the Detroit speech, how many other speakers do you think were there that day? Are we talking about a large amount, like an all-day thing?
Oh, yeah. The march was about an hour and a half long, and the speeches, of course, just like the Washington March, everyone had, who was somebody wanted to make remarks, and there were singers and very, very, very similar format. The mayor spoke, the governor, representative spoke, and the minister, Reverend Clegg spoke, C.L. Franklin spoke, everybody who was someone in the movement, president of the NAACP and so forth, all I remembered was Martin Luther King saying, I have a dream. And by the way, the speech, that's what people focused on through the years. They really didn't focus that much on the dream part until after King was assassinated, and now it's called that. But if you look at his speech and listen to it, he was really talking about how the government of this country, way back after emancipation and after the Civil War and all, had promised so much to the free blacks, and we just had given us a bad check, you know.
Yes.
And that's the theme, that we were there marching. He was there marching to cash that check because it had come back insufficient funds.
Wow.
You know,
wow.
and that's what the speech was really about: jobs and employment, you know, economic issues. And so many people had spoken before him. I'm speaking of the Washington speech.
Yes.
And he was at the very end, and he just kind of summarized some of the things.
Summarized it. He was
then he just went, into that other mode.
Oh, that's
that
great.
we know.
That's great.
Today.
That's great. Once again, you're watching Take 10 on Tuesday with the Tennessee Tribune. I'm Jason Luntz, and we're talking to Gloria McKissack about her time at the Detroit Walk to Freedom March on June 23rd, 1963. Now, what I really would like to know is, so you stated you were born in Detroit, Michigan, during the race riot at that, and then you came down to AI, which is now Tennessee State, here in Nashville.
Right.
You had mentioned that in the 60s there was a time where people started to notice there was a correlation between the northern and southern African American struggle. Can you speak a little bit about your experience when you moved to Nashville, coming from a northern environment?
Okay.
And how that made you become a part of the movement?
Okay. I was speaking of people older than myself. I was young and very naive. It's a little debutante girl.
Right.
Okay. Upper middle class, and had not been exposed to a lot of discrimination, although it was all around me. I wasn't really that much aware of it. You know, the North had different ways of doing things. The signs were not there, but there was discrimination in housing. They didn't have segregated schools. I didn't go to a segregated school, but they gerrymandered you. You know, they changed the districts. There was a lot of stuff. And I think the Southern movement was a catalyst that made Northern blacks begin to really take a harder and deeper look at some of the problems that were there. Not to say that the North was, not involved in civil rights. My father was very active in civil rights, and his organizations that he belonged to helped to get the first black to sit on the city council, was one of the club members, the Cotillion Club. They got Diggs, was the first black congressman out of Michigan, and so forth. So the cities like Detroit were vanguards of many things, but still we sort of grew up thinking that the North was better than the South. And somehow in there you begin to realize that there wasn't that much difference.
Yes.
I'm going to borrow someone's quote, not a dime's worth of difference. Between the North and the South, we still basically had the same problems. And so I watched things on television, and my dad told me not to get involved in the civil rights movement. We were watching Birmingham and the dogs and the hoses and stuff, and my eyes were all big, and I said, oh, damn, why would I get involved in that, And I'm packing my ball gowns to go to school. He said, you're not going to a party. I went to a different kind of party, though, and got a different kind of education when I did come south, because I found myself involved in the movement. I lived in the city, and so I had more freedom than girls on campus who had curfews. And when we were approached by the Freedom Riders, I did not really realize that why these students had been expelled. I don't even know that I knew at that time that they had been expelled for being in the Freedom Riders. They were going around the a student union trying to recruit students to continue to go downtown and demonstrate, and no one would. And I've got a picture of myself when I was thrown out of my first demonstration at Wilson Quick, and everyone in the picture other than the Freedom Riders, John Lewis, now Congressman, is in the picture, and Catherine Burks, who was a Freedom Rider, and Frederick Leonard, you know, Freedom Riders. The other people in the picture are all from Detroit.
What?
All from Detroit, outsiders, and we were continuing what Nash and others had started in '61. The lunch counters had been integrated, but it's supposed to be integrated, but they were still places that were holding out. And the movement after that went beyond just sitting at lunch counters. We attacked everything that was still segregated. The restaurants, the hotels, the grocery stores for hiring, you know, the parks, the swimming pools, everywhere, you know, we were demonstrating. So that was just a catalyst for things that could continue.
Wow.
Yeah, so I got involved. When I came south, it was just a wide awakening for me to see those colored signs only, and just to be faced with adversity. And when I was dragged out of that Wilson Quick that first day, I had no training in nonviolence. They just told us what to do, you know. And I was a gutsy Detroiter, you know. Nobody called you a nigger up north, excuse me, but that's the reality. I have to use that, you know. And that's what a woman called me, and as they dragged me out and threw me on the street, and I said, I'm in.
Oh, wow. Wow. Wow, that was deep. Wow, that was deep. I'm blown away by that. And over the years, you kept your commitment to the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I'm still involved. I'm on the board of the Nashville Veterans for the Civil Rights Movement.
That's great.
I still do things. Trying to get a monument here in Nashville to commemorate what people went through, the struggle.
Yes, yeah.
Because Nashville was the first city to integrate its lunch counters. Greensboro gets all the credit, but it was Nashville, and the Freedom Rides would have ended if it was not for Nashvillians who continued the Freedom Ride.
It's strange how Nashville is so underlooked in so many things in black, the civil rights movement aspect of Nashville, the music legacy in black music in Nashville. I don't know why, but I think things like what you're doing can definitely help. We got to get the word out that this city did play a part.
Yeah, and still a lot of things need to be done, and I'm so excited because this weekend is the 50th anniversary. They're going to commemorate the March on Washington.
That's right.
And I didn't go 50 years ago. I was at the Walk to Freedom in Detroit. And by the way, a lot of Detroiters didn't go to D.C. because they had already experienced that in their own city. So I didn't get to the march then. But I'm going this Saturday. I'm so excited. I'm going with a group from American Baptist Seminar College. And I'm taking a couple youngsters with me, too.
All right.
Yeah.
Some of the girls from Lighten the Path that we spoke about?
You got it.
All right. That's great. One more thing before I let you go. I just want everyone to see. You guys have to see the cover. Can we hold it up for them?
Oh, yeah.
This is Life magazine. It was after the March in Washington. And on the cover, it has the two gentlemen that are credited as the leaders of the march. That's what was Randolph?
A. Randolph.
A. Randolph.
And Maynard.
Maynard Rustin. Yes. So it was a big part of the movement, and I love that we speak about the great legacy of Dr. King, but it was people like Ms. McKissack and so many others that played such a huge part in the civil rights movement. I'm just honored that we had the opportunity to talk to you today.
Well, it's an honor to be here. I'm always happy to share.
All right. And if you don't know, you're the first person to do a Take 10 twice.
Whoa.
That's right. So keep staying in tune, and we really appreciate your support and watching us. And thank you again.
Thank you, Jason.
Okay.
Anytime.
Great. And once again, you watch Take 10 on Tuesday with the Tennessee Tribune. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.